I don't think some people need no introduction. I think tonight is no exception. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I'm sorry we were a little bit late getting everyone into the room. So I think everyone knows who our guest tonight is, Professor Delores Cahill. She's a living legend.
In my own head.
In everyone's head, every awake person's head, let's say. And like I say, it's we're really looking forward to the conversation. I'll ask, as I mentioned in the group earlier, if you can put your hands up as soon as possible, and we'll sort of go through in an orderly fashion. So the format of this today really is there's no particular subject. It's about Q&A, and we can talk about everything from flat Earth, I guess, to aliens, reptilians, and what Delores is up to in her pursuits at the moment. As a fugitive from the law, I keep getting told. What's that all about?
I got a new alleged warrant with no autograph, last week.
So we're talking to a genuine fugitive from the law.
Related to 2020, you're supposed to be lawfully, if you do have, this is in Ireland, and it's like 4 years later, and they're regurgitating some trip I took in 2020 with a no autographed, document.
So before we get started, Delores, is there anything you wanted to talk about? Anything open mic for 5 minutes, or did you just want to get straight?
Well, I can tell you what I'm doing between now and Christmas, if that would be of interest.
Go for it. Yeah, that'd be great.
It generally involves like waking up every day thinking, what do they not want us to do? Yeah, well, so the thing is what I've been working on for a long time, and it's with the same people that are co-founders with the World Freedom Alliance. And
Delores, just before you get started, can I just get everyone to mute their mics, because there's a little bit of interference. So mute your mic so we can hear the living legend speak. I don't know whose mic's on. Jackie's is on. Jackie, Ali's on.
Dan's is on, I think, and Ali's is on, and that's it.
And of course, everyone has a total right to challenge anything I say, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct it, right? You know what I mean? I don't take myself too seriously, but thank you for the nice, as if I'm a living legend. But, I'm part of the thing, which I don't take myself seriously at all. But it's one of the things we're doing, and I've been working on, so it's kind of important. It's the same group of people since 2020, behind the scenes, and about 80% of the people in Ireland that are still there are what we call the language of sabotage and infiltration. So it's just about their actions, which is kind of important. That people could be very nice people, but it's whether their actions are sabotage or not. So what's beautiful is, and I know people like Laura and Nina have been really, I think, articulating it really well, so I think it's very interesting. But part of what we've been doing since 2020 was actually looking at, and I've been studying the CIA, and of course in Northern Ireland, we experienced it for 30 years about how do you actually infiltrate a society. And they use the same model in Northern Ireland for Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. And there is an actual science around infiltration, right, and sabotage. Just, right, So what's interesting is in the World Freedom Alliance, we had like an open discussion since 2020. We're in all of the countries really around the world and all the continents about, we actually were educating people on how sabotage works. And we'll say in 2020, it was very interesting that people in Argentina or New Zealand or Tanzania, or in Canada or in Ireland, it was the exact same process of sabotage, right? How it all works with the police and with the media. So why that's a little bit important is that 2 or 3 years on, what I think the people behind the agenda, and this agenda goes on obviously for this century, is that what they don't want is that people can weed out the people that have been designed in our societies to prevent momentum of local communities, supporting people who grow food and local farmers and business people, So what I've been saying the last few months is the most revolutionary thing you can do now is become a member of your local community in any platform, right? And grow your own food. And one of the things we'll be rolling out in the next few months in Britain and Ireland is just the paperwork for the co-ops, right? So the most revolutionary thing you can do really is become a member of a co-op, in order that you push, as some people who are aware, your purchasing power to those in the community, whether it is a nurse or a physician or a hairdresser or a farmer, that really decides to give you products that they can stand over in the law, which means they don't use pesticides or glyphosates, or if you are a physician, that you will give them the best health advice. So with the group, so how we push back, and I'll only talk for another 2 or 3 more minutes, David, right? Just say, so the whole thing, if any of you saw my Richard Vobes interview in May around trial by jury, and on my Telegram channel, there's a lot of fake ones, but mine is just the @ Delores Cahill. I did an interview that went up yesterday, Saturday, the 30th of September. I just talk about the cooperative, centuries-old cooperative we're doing in the law, but the reason why we're doing it through the cooperative model is to support local communities who don't have the paperwork. I will be setting up custodian co-op, and if people don't have a co-op in their community, they can become a member of custodian, and then we're going to give the paperwork to about 8 local communities in Britain and Ireland as pilots, and about 8 health hubs as pilots. But the longer term strategy is to run the training of jurors through the cooperative system, because we were trying to figure out how can we contact tens of thousands of people. So when the co-ops take the paperwork, it's only 8 pages. The co-ops are independent, so if you have a co-op in Aberdeen or in Cambridge, or you've got a co-op of 4 farmers or whatever, you can take the paperwork. Now, what we've done is modified the paperwork so that it complies with the law and the legal system. So if you're completely sovereign, you can take that paperwork and you as men and women can join. So all the paperwork that was available around the world was just you could join as a legal entity. Now it's quite simple. But initially, there are 9 of us in the core, we're calling it, behind the co-op paperwork. In the core, we don't want any members. We're just there to help people. And if we've made a mistake in the paperwork, the first 10 or 14 groups or whatever will give us feedback. And then the aim is to help. So the health hubs would be if you're a nurse or a physician and you've been struck off. I'm going to also set up a custodian health hub. So last week I had a nurse over, and she has 600 nurses that have all lost their jobs in Sweden. And she and many of them are thinking of joining as members. And this paperwork is applicable all around the world, and it is in the law or the natural law. And then the idea would be, if you have a health hub and the health hub is in a co-op in England or in Devon or wherever, that if you are struck off as a nurse in their world, in the legal system, and 50 boys in blue or black come in, because they have to, if there's going to be another lockdown, make a precedence by intimidating nurses and doctors or closing down a care home that allows the family in, that then whoever is affected, like David or the owner of the care home or an elderly person, can then instigate a trial by jury to challenge on what authority are the General Medical Council interfering with living men and women in a local community. Because when I rang the People's Health Alliance, and I'm in touch with the World Council for Health, and obviously I'm president of the World Doctors Alliance, and I'm in touch with people all around the world, that 4 years on, there is no protection for nurses and doctors. They're literally been hung out to dry, or pathologists or good people anywhere. So what this is, and this is the strategy kind of that we had, that I had behind the World Doctors Alliance and the World Freedom Alliance, is that we would get networks of people, and then we need to set up this trial by jury, because every coroner or every man dressed as police, it's not so safe. 50 people come into David and none of them gave their name, and they're trying to say he cannot give vitamin D or he cannot give life-saving medication. That if that happens in a local community where David is a member of his own health hub as a co-op, and the local community are aware that David as a physician can operate in the law, he does not need the corporation to be licensed to anything. That if the men and women, like if the man dressed up as a policeman, either he gives it or his name or he doesn't, but we can identify them, then David and the local community can challenge, will say, Tom dressed up as police? For on what authority can Tom interfere with David giving life-saving treatment as a physician in law? And then the local community, or it can be a precedence where thousands of people come. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm hand holding and filling in the paperwork. I will have custodian co-op, custodian health hub for individual people who want my protection for as long as I'm alive and I'm able to do it, right? So what I would be offering to health professionals would be, if they join the custodian one, that if they do get challenged in Sweden or in, you know, anywhere in the world, that I could then be their lawful advocate, so that not everyone knows the law at my level. You know what I mean? And it's a process, right? And obviously my role has been to try to educate people. And maybe the last thing is, if I can just show one slide and then I'll stop talking. Is that okay? I just want to show one slide because this is like, I want to publicize this. If you can let me just screen share.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm trying. Hang on.
Or Damien can.
Damien's on it.
Damien's on it.
I hope he is.
Damien's on it, but Damien's quite.
You just down the bottom. You press click the share screen as the
Yeah,
host.
it's going to share my screen, isn't it?
No, I can do it if you do enable screen sharing. But just to say, for a lot of people, you know, when I was doing Trafalgar Square, I was actually preparing so that when we would come to the years ahead, where people would think, well, you know, my background is in science or whatever, that part of the thing of me traveling and organizing the Trafalgar Square events in 2020 was to show that I wouldn't end up in prison, you know, because now 3 or 4 years on, why would anyone take my word that I know the law, unless how you can demonstrate you know the law is you actually challenge the entire system. Now, of course, they can go around murdering people, right? So you have to be prepared to die, really, you know? Do you know what I mean? They can always like just get rid of you. But if they don't, they either, like, as you know, there was warrants. There are 3 warrants, I think, in Ireland that I've never seen, even though I've been asking for them. And there was a warrant to put me and I haven't criminally convicted. It was up to 10 years in prison for organizing a meeting of 30 people outside in August 2020. And we had, the first one was 2 years in prison. We had 40,000 people. And then when we organized this next one a month later, Boris Johnson upped it to 10 years in prison, and I was the organizer, and nobody went near me, right? You know, I basically was asking the people dressed as Robocops and police that I was going to challenge them. Yeah. So what I'm just to give people a little bit of hope about what we're at in trying to protect communities. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just these 2 slides. So what we've been doing, now I'm completely censored as well off of social media. What a lot of freedom fighters don't really realize when they go, oh, we don't hear about you very much. There's an automatic algorithm that takes my videos down on every platform after 6 seconds automatically. So it's a little, you know, for me, when the freedom fighters go, oh, Delores, we haven't heard of you, it's because I'm completely censored, you know, just in case people don't know why. And one of the reasons is that if you figure out their system, then they actually get afraid, you know, you kind of flip the whole thing. So this slide is just to show you that in 2021 and 22, we have been challenging the operation of the legal system in Ireland, you know, through the government. Is it lawful? What's going on? And we've also been challenging the Vatican and the City of London in a lawful process with a public trial by jury in Ireland, with, like, you know, totally public, and giving them like 6 months of notice and writing to them and then telling them the outcome. But this is an example of writing to the Office of the Attorney General in Ireland. And this is John Flanagan, who's chair of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the IRB, which is essentially a sovereign organization set up in 1858. And everyone who proclaimed our independence in 1916, 7 out of 7 were members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, as was my grandfather. And they proclaim the nation in law. But now we are writing. Can you see the Office of the Attorney General? And then if the man paid as Attorney General was lawful, he would autograph his name, right, from his office. But he's just put AGO, you see? So this is just to kind of give you a little bit of hope that if a nation gets together and then just starts asking the question, wait a minute, who are you in the General Medical Council? Or who are you dressed up as the head of police or the Chief Justice or the head of the Supreme Court? Why they won't put their name to it is that they are actually not operating in the law, and issuing documents on headed notepaper without autographing them is multiple offenses in law, like fraud, misrepresentation of the law, issuing a counterfeit document, right? But also, if you are paid as Attorney General and you don't actually authorize the documents, that may be malfeasance, which is lifetime in prison for, it's a special crime reserved for people who are paid and are duty bound and lawfully bound to uphold the law, but are actually misrepresenting the law by operating instead through the all caps name, the legal system, which is a commercial trading entity that is an agent of a foreign state in all of our nations and is lifetime in prison for them. So, and maybe just in March 2021, I did a 10-minute video, challenged all of the police checkpoints. There was like thousands of police checkpoints. They were stopping people traveling, stopping people going to the St. Patrick's Day parade. And in the 10-minute video, I said, everybody, so 250,000 people came to the St. Patrick's Day parade. All the meetings for 2 months were in my house. I was one of the organizers. The St. Patrick's Day parade was within a mile of my home just to have fun with them. It was in their limit, you know, just to see what they would do. And then about 4 days before, I put up a 10-minute video and said, everybody come to Ireland, which they did, take a video, whoever's dressed up as police, thousands of you take the videos. I will randomly take 12. I will prosecute myself, the 12 people dressed up as police, seek £20 or €20 compensation if they were turned around to go back to Galway or Cork. But if in the event that they do, it's 20 years in prison today in Ireland or England to dress up as police and interfere with people's freedom of travel, which is the exact same thing as the 15-minute cities or saying you can't travel unless you have a PCR test. And that video came out on Sunday, the 13th of March. And by 13th, 14th of March, all the checkpoints were there, but 0 police turned up out of the 14,000 and the checkpoints disappeared, right? So that's the thing about the law. You don't actually need to anything, you just challenge one man or woman. And that's why the Attorney General, who is the lawfully the highest role in law, right, in the land, is now afraid to put his name to a piece of paper from his office. So the thing why I want to get this out is that all the civil servants and the nurses and the General Medical Council and the people we pay as police, right, if the Attorney General won't put his name to anything because writing to someone as doctor or as the corporation is lifetime in prison for them, then everyone else, right? But that's kind of a protection, just that knowledge for you know, you are a physician, David, right? So when you're qualified as a medical professional, after you have your qualification, or a nurse, you have a profession like a nurse and a physician that no one can take away from you. And this doctor thing is just docking the fraudulent transaction of when the baby is born, generating a fraudulent financial trust that they then fraudulently deceive everybody, right? Which is a criminal offense. And sadly, the term doctor is just referred to docking fraudulently the remains of the placenta. So that's where the Mr. Joe Smith, all caps, you know, birthing cert trust is actually done by the doctors, which is fraud, right? So no one should be putting doctor, right? And so that means that actually is entrapping everyone for their lifetime where their property is stolen. So the General Medical Council is only regulating this fraudulent banking system, which is exactly what's going on by the people dressed up as police and the people dressed up fraudulently misrepresenting and the coroners, right? It's all fraud if your name is Mr. Smith. So partly that knowledge then is that if you're in a health hub and the boys in blue are trying to keep this fraud going on with the General Medical Council that want the doctors to keep going on with the fraud, then someone like me can step in for David or a Nurse Mary and then challenge the General Medical Council, and then the GMC will also not take the proceedings because they also hold the professional and private liability and their indemnity insurance and their house, right? Against, so anyone accusing you, David, of doing your lawful duty of giving proper, like vitamin D or proper treatment that is more good than harm, for them it's actually lifetime in prison, which the local community can then hold a trial by jury. And so we're holding a trial by jury, I am, on the 2nd of December 2023 as an educational event. I'm looking for a football stadium just to wreck their heads, right? Somewhere between Oxford and England, and it could be the 15-minute cities, but we will be taking suggestions, whether it's around the abuse that's going on in the schools or anything, you know, a coroner's death cert or whatever. So it will be an educational event. But if they decide to put the lockdown in October, another one, then I will be the organizer of the event with the 2nd of December. I'm doing it with Mick Stott, who was the founders of the Guardians 300 and trained 120,000 people. I was one of the first Guardian trainers. And then if there is a lockdown, it will be a way for people to resist the lockdown. And then if someone touches me or tries to prevent me going, then the trial by jury can be around the man or woman dressed up as police involved in that. But it may be a mechanism to actually take down the lockdown. And that will be in England. And we're looking for a stadium. So that's what I'm at.
I don't know what to say to that, Delores. Wow, amazing work. Brilliant. You are a living legend, so don't deny that.
Yeah. I mean, I have some questions, but I think I'm just going to open it to others. Really, it's really, really interesting stuff.
Is anyone put their hand up? There's no hands up at the moment. I saw Chris put his actual hand up, so I don't know if there's an issue with the icon. So we'll go to Chris first, if that's
okay. I'll just take your mic off, Chris.
Well, I don't know if people think that's useful. So I'm going to do custodian as well. If anybody doesn't want to do a health hub, I'll just do one. See what happens.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Great stuff. I want to just ask you a question about the vaccines. And so just to sort of preface that, some of us know people who've died very quickly after having boosters with turbo cancers or what have you. We probably also know people who've had 6, 7 boosters who are, you know, full of health and vitality. And I was just thinking, surely over this time, the good guys, the good scientists have managed to get their hands on enough vials from different, you know, of the injectables from enough manufacturers to have analyzed things. And I'm just wondering what your knowledge is of different batches, or have there been saline batches? Do you know about this in terms of analysis of the injectables by the good guys?
Very good. So I might just screen share again, just for everybody to see if you want to know the data, you know. So I know you kind of know, but this is just called openvaers.com. Open, OPENVAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Reporting System. And then if you just go to the thing about the data, and then there's a thing on it called Red Box Summaries. So this is just the deaths reported to the Vaccine Adverse Event System in America. And then you can see that we say related to vaccine injuries across the United States, which is around 300 million people, there were probably less than 1,000, we'll say, maybe 500 across 300 million people. and then over 22,000 in 2021. Yeah, when the vaccines, the COVID-19s particularly, were rolled out. And there's 12,000 in 2022, and we're halfway through, or whatever, 2,700. So I suppose if you want to look at the number of deaths, then irrespective of batches, this is around the deaths reported for all ages. And you can see that of all the people that are going to die within the first 4 weeks of the injection, many people die within minutes or hours of the injection. Now, this is totally unlawful. So this is, for example, 8,000 people die within 24 hours, but actually there's more than 4,000 people, 4,200 that die within minutes of the injection. Yeah. So I suppose, just so you know, in the law, so in my research and in companies, we had 20,000 people where we, analyzed them on clinical trials where 0 people died. But in the law, if one man or woman dies on a trial, the trial must be stopped in the law. So part of the thing is in the legal system, because they don't recognize, they only deal with this corporation, Mr. Smith or Miss Smith, is in their world enrolled in the trial, which is criminal and unlawful. Then because they are a non-living entity, it's a business enrolled in the trial, then the debts are not properly dealt with, which is a criminal offense for the physicians, doctors, and everybody involved in any vaccine. So anyone who's injecting any of the COVID-19 vaccines, because it's known to cause death, it is actually a criminal offense. Yeah. So then you have the issue is, what is the percentage of the placebos? And, when I came out in 2020 about the mRNA injection, if people remember, now one of the reasons why I stopped talking about the adverse events as in an active way from the middle of 2021 was most of the injections were already done, and I was being censored anyway. But there is an issue that if someone talks about people having adverse events after a medical treatment, there's what's called a nocebo effect. So it would be unethical, for me to keep going on about adverse events, because it turns out that the mind is very powerful. Christopher, do you get it? And that we can't, so it's actually a good thing that if people do not have adverse events for whatever reason, that we don't try and, worry them so much that we may put them into a mindset, Christopher?
So, yeah, I get that. But I think my question is more about whether sort of good scientists have managed to get their hands on enough files of the injectables to analyze and to detect whether there were distinct differences in batches, or indeed whether there were just saline.
Yeah, so we have. So people may not know that my area of expertise was in, actually my companies were involved in making the mass spectrometers, which are the workhorses of forensic pathology and testing, right? A mass spectrometer. And we have collected the vials, and we actually had a call out since 2020 all around the world to do the analysis, but no one has literally supported us to do that work around the world. So all the people who are aware have not supported us. So I've had a call out since 2020 that we do have those, but to do the analysis, we have to subcontract out to people. I'm doing everything voluntarily, and I've put $500,000 into this myself, but literally no one has given us any money to do this research in the World Freedom Alliance or the World Doctors Alliance. So it's kind of back on everyone. We can do the work. We actually, I know 4 physicians that actually ended up handling those in one nation, one European nation. 4 of them died within a few weeks, right? So we have people putting our lives at risk to do this, but no one is supporting us to actually do the analysis. But we have kept them there historically. People have put their lives at risk, but it's actually amazing how, no one is actually who has, like I was involved in launching Can We Talk About It, which is a worldwide campaign as well to raise awareness about adverse events with Aga Wilson or whatever. So, we have those samples. They are, not anywhere near me because I'm so targeted. But we have access to them. So it's really over to society now to say, like, I could do it in a heartbeat. I led the world PCR sequencing consortium in 2020, and we challenged and paid for ourselves because no one supported us we had to pay people to write the grants to do the ethics approval in order to get ethics approval to sequence and take samples to challenge whether the PCR tests were accurate or not. And that was around $15,000, which we didn't get support from. And we did lots of interviews and we ended up paying for it ourselves. Yeah. And when the clinical trial, when the ethics was granted on the 21st of July, 2021, within 24 hours, the CDC and FDA across America did a class 1 recall of all PCR testing. So essentially, we stopped all PCR testing. So we've had a call out all around the world. We have the vials, but literally nobody is actually, now I'm not looking for money. I put in all my money, right? So I don't have a bad conscience. I'm doing all this for free. But what's very interesting is that the families and even a lot of the very wealthy people around the world that I've had phone calls, I've said, if we could analyze what's in the vials, it would help your family recover. And I wanted to set up health hubs to detox people, because how we can do it is in phase 4 clinical trials, and that's my area of expertise, right? So partly I am putting my own money to set up health hubs to do phase 4 clinical trials to actually analyze it. But literally, no one is supporting us. That's the reality, right? So it's.
I find that amazing that nobody's
can do that.
Nobody's got any data. I find it amazing that
there are groups, Chris. There are, just to cut in as an extension.
I was going to ask you, Dave.
I don't know what happens with the data. It's just the same thing that happens to the Hammersmith. The file that was handed to them. It goes under that big carpet. But I know for a fact that there's a group for Doctors for COVID Ethics. An Israeli doctor spoke, and he did viral analysis live to us all on a Sunday evening. And the guy was an organic chemist, I think. And he was saying he could not identify what was in there. Certainly there was no mRNA. There was self-assembly nano material that he'd never seen with his eye before. We know that Rob Verkerk and World Council for Health presented data on, what was in the vial analysis stuff. You got Quinta Columna, Andreas Nowak led that, and the graphene oxide or dihydroxide. And what happened to him? He ended up bumped off. And there's a New Zealand group as well. So we've got all these groups that are looking at the vials, and nothing seems to happen to the evidence. We've got prima facie evidence.
Well, that's why that's not really. So the thing is, you can't have ad hoc people just in labs saying things that they can't verify, right? That's not how science works. So the same when we did the PCR sequencing consortium is you have to put the evidence where it is aliquoted to about 12 labs and then get people to, that's what we did. That's what I do in my, I was on the Nobel Prize nominating committee and various organizations around research integrity. You have to actually have a system where you aliquot the vials, where people autograph in law that they will do the analysis. They will submit their analysis, and the proportion of the samples has to be held back in case they are misrepresenting what's in the vials. So you absolutely cannot have one or two groups around the world just giving information. But that is it's very easy to do it in the law. And that's why when I led with 4 other scientists in America, particularly Dr. Jack Lyons-Weiler, and it was Dr. Sin Lee, a retired professor from Yale, who's one of the top people. When we launched the World PCR Sequencing Project and got ethics approval, if we were going to analyze somebody's PCR, we were going to aliquot it into 12 different samples and then give up to 4 or 8 of those samples to independent labs. Then we would do the analysis and then let all the other labs in the world, 4 other labs independently check it, and then keep back 4 samples for the government if they wanted to challenge us, right? So that's what I mean. It doesn't actually work that somebody checks a sample for one thing and say it doesn't have mRNA, right? Because I made mRNA. You can physically look under one microscope and see one thing, but you have to do an mRNA technique, which is a completely different. So no one can say it doesn't contain mRNA unless you actually do mRNA analysis, right? Now, I ran one of the top my company was, and my research group were literally the top lab in the world, because I was taking down, like in my 20s, so 20, 30 years ago, fraudulent tests taken on the pharmaceutical industry myself, saying this lab, this test, which is saying people has cancer, is not accurate. And I put all of my, results and my screening methodology in an institute that I set up with others called the Resource Center of the German Human Genome Project. And I wrote a grant in my 20s that funded 40 technicians for 10 years by the German government to put in all my results, right? So what I was saying to everyone, and that's why I became one of the world leaders in research integrity, is if you make a claim, you have to put the material into the public domain and aliquot it, so that if I say there's no mRNA, that it can be sent to the top 4 labs, other competing labs, to verify what I'm doing, right? And to the government, right? So it's like if the pharmaceutical industry or the diagnostic industry has got a test, I just can't say the test doesn't work. I have to say I'm making a claim. This is the one I bought from your kit, right? From your catalog. This is, I'm aliquoting it, right? Video, you're aliquoting it, give it to the company, give it to the regulator, give it to, an international repository, give it to 4 other competing labs. Then I give my results, and then I have to be challenged. So it's absolutely not right that anyone can come out and say, vial X contains this without going through the process. Now, the process is very simple. Now, what is shocking is, and I've been offering to do this and go anywhere in the world since 2020 for free at my own expense to test the vials, right? Because what's shocking is, and we've been saying it to all the adverse events groups behind the scene and Children's Health Defence, if we really want to detox people, particularly from the potential impacts of heart attacks or infertility, we have to know what's in the vials. So I was literally in plain English saying to grandparents and parents, when their lovely sons and daughters is, if you, and some of these were very wealthy, but I mean, it's ordinary people, right? If the people in England, don't really want to do this, then it won't happen. But if you want the generation of people in their 20s and 30s to be detoxed, you really need to test the vials that they were given in order to detox them from whatever was in those vials. Because, and I'll just let you come in, Christopher, what people are not aware of is there were multiple clinical trials going on at the same time. That's why different age groups were given different injections at different time periods, right? Yeah. So because you've got 10 vials and they've got ABC, and and they're not tested for DEF, doesn't mean, right? If you don't have the ability to test for some nanoparticles, you can't say it doesn't contain nanoparticles. If you're a nanoparticle guy, right? But also we know that there is future proofing for the next so-called pandemics, for the next few generations, right? There's possibly the templates of whatever are going to be the PCR tests of the future, 20, 30 years down the line, in these things. So if you really want to detox people from what they were injected with, you have to actually analyze the people who have the adverse events. Now, and what my technology that I invented and patented worldwide was high content protein arrays, but we could have put nanoparticles, graphene, proteins, antibodies, mRNAs, all of the constituents of all of the injections on a high content protein array. And then I can check which man or woman got which vaccine by the response that they will keep in their blood forever, right? In a court of law. And our technology was unique, and that's why I had death threats and was put in a coma from 2005 and 6, right? Because and I've written papers on how we can test it, is that the men and women who are injected will keep a memory in their blood and in their immune system for all of the contents of the vials. So we don't even need the vials, we just need to check people's blood. But if you really want to detox people, including infertility or whatever has been racked up for the decades to come, we need to get people to actually fund it. Now, no one is funding us, right? Now, it's fine, I've put in all my money, but part of the reason, and I don't mind it, but it is shocking, the sooner you detox people, the more chance they have of restoring fertility and health. So that's partly why I'm moving into now the health hub phase, because we need to now generate money to protect these people. If their families and nobody is actually protecting them, then I'm going to generate a system where we can actually do it in the law. And what we have to do is protect the people, because nobody is protecting the scientists who are actually doing this work, right? Nobody. So I rang every worldwide health organization, every freedom movement. So what we're doing is putting the co-ops in the law, and then the paperwork for the patients or clients that interact with them will be in the law. The health hubs will be in the local communities. I and the group of 9 of us will educate people about trial by jury, so that we can actually go on and try and help and detox these people without the individual nurses and doctors being arrested, you know?
Yeah, thanks for that. That was really well explained. I'll let some other people jump in now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can see I'm obviously frustrated because the more harm happens. So it's exactly what they wanted happened, is that people didn't really rock up to support the detox of people with adverse events on a community level. You know what I mean? That communities didn't get together, and they have obviously tried to fragment communities. And that's what a lot of the infiltration is, an infiltration in the freedom movement of people who are leading people up blind alleys, that is not effective, rather than local communities and growing food and getting people to actually know and love each other and spend a bit of time talking to people with adverse events and supporting the doctors and the nurses. So that's why we are where we are. But sadly, the more years go by for people in their 20s or 30s, the less easy it is to recover them from life-limiting or fertility-limiting adverse events.
Well, I have a question, but before I ask it, I just want to put it out there to everyone else. If you've got a question, pop your hands up. David, was that you? Did you put your hand up, David?
No, I think Vicky has.
Vicky, oh yes, let me unmute you, Vicky, sorry.
Oh, is it me first?
Yeah.
Hi, Delores, I can't thank you enough. You were the person right at the beginning who made me realise I wasn't insane. And you changed everything, so my family and our wee family are protected, but thank you so much for everything you're still doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So my question is, if shedding is real, is it possible to suffer the same effects as someone who's actually been vaccinated? And if so, how do we detox from that? And also, how do we protect ourselves moving forward?
Good question. So I guess the thing is, and partly, so this would be the conversations that I would have 2 or 3 years ago, which is totally, I get it. So one of the things that's a bit of a headache, right? One of the calls I've had is to do this integrity project thing on whether the so-called virus exists or not, right? So just related to shedding, yeah, is that one of the things as a scientist, where people say, oh, well, someone should come out and say, so for shedding to happen, the virus would have to exist. You're nodding. Is that okay? Just to bring everyone with me, right? Because the word shedding is a loaded word, isn't it? It's not a random word. Shedding implies that something if the virus existed, it exists. It's been made in people, or people catch a virus and it's in them. And then when they breathe, is that okay? And Vicky, you can keep nodding.
Can I jump in, Delores, with my humble opinion? So whether virus exists or not, I get pulled into this argument a lot, but whatever's in that vial, let's say it's mRNA for want of an argument, but that mRNA codes for, it transfects into the cell and it codes for a protein that we're calling the spike protein, whether that's a viral protein or whether that's a bioweapon, to speculate.
No, that's good, but I think it's important, if it's okay, David, the reason, exactly, that I get it, right? But the reason why I just want to walk people through is that it's a bit like, when Christopher was asking the question about, oh, well, someone had a microscope and saw something, that was three-dimensional structure, but there was no mRNA, right? That is so unscientific, right? So a lot of the dialogue will say that people have been getting away with even as scientists, you know, that say if they have an expert in one technique, that they can then say, well, I found X. I have no idea how to test for Y, but therefore Y mustn't exist. That's not how science works, you know. So the whole thing with shedding then, and this is kind of fundamental, and it's part of, you know, this whole psyop is a bit of an onion, and it's literally a head wreck, right? You know, so partly why I wouldn't have explained it 2 or 3 years ago, because people would, you know, part of the thing that they're doing is called cognitive dissonance, right? So when we talk about the art of sabotage, there is a whole lot of manipulation, right? That's engineered, right? And a lot of it is done by psychology and the Tavistock Institute and, you know, right? But part of the thing is that your mind actually switches off if things get very complicated, yeah? So the shedding thing is part of the thing, right? So David, why I just want to go into it is that for a scientist like me, no one can say the virus exists or it doesn't exist without doing a simple experiment, right? And so I can't say the virus exists or it doesn't exist without actually doing this simple experiment, right? Which we've had loads of discussions about it, and it's quite fundamental, right? Yeah, that you can say, well, let's stop the discussion. Let's just write a piece of paper. So I had the Integrity Project and the World Integrity Project, and we've been offering this since 2020. And the simple question is that you write to the pharmaceutical industry, who've got a whole lot of money, and just simply ask them, what did you make the vaccine against? Right? And then you give me in the World Integrity Project, and I'll pick like 24 other top scientists, right? And then we will analyze what you give us that you made the vaccine against. And then we'll aliquot it, you know, send it to the top 24 labs in the world, keep enough aliquots for another 24, right? And then whatever you made it against, it either is a virus or it's not, right? Now, that's like, and I've been proposing that, but you know, that's why I'm so censored. Do you get it? I want you to nod, right? Because before we start asking about shedding, we have to go, well, what was the vaccine made against? Now, and then the other thing is, for the men and women we pay as the government, if they transferred money to buy a product that they locked down the country for, right? A product, right? What was that made against? And can the government give us the product that they paid all this money for and locked down the world for, right? And then it's up to the pharmaceutical industry and the government to give us the product. And then people like me can lead an international thing where it's very transparent, right? But the thing is, everybody has been falling into the trap for the last 4 years of having a discussion about whether it exists or not without actually setting up the scientific, very simple experiment. You give it to us and we tell you whether it's a vaccine or virus, okay? So does that everyone just nod and say that's fairly simple, isn't it? Now, that's okay. Now, the reason why I'm just saying is like, it's so simple, right? What did we pay for, right? And then if the pharmaceutical industry made a product to protect you against what? Now, the reason why that's important, and when we're doing a trial by jury, it is that if what I was doing 30 years ago, right, was challenging pharmaceutical and diagnostic industry that their products were not what they said. Now, it turns out that's fraud, right? So this Agenda 21 is the Agenda 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, 2070, 2080, 2090, and they have it all mapped out for the next 78 years, right? Or 77 years, whatever it is. And they have a whole cycle for what's going to happen in the years before each time they lock down the world. And that's how I knew in 2019 it was going to come, right? And I was telling my network. So if we can just challenge them on that way, then we stop. You know, it's the same kind of challenge you can use over the next 80 years, right? So that's kind of a little head wreck that is very simple. And in a way, we shouldn't have been listening to all these debates about whether the virus exists or not without people actually saying, well, can we just all work together, challenge the government and the pharmaceutical industry to give us what they made the thing against, and then we can see whether it's shedding or not, right? Or whatever the bullshit is. Okay? So then the other thing then, which you're, to go to your point, David, is about shedding. It turns out, and I gave evidence in 2001 to the American Congress a month after the, you know, the Twin Towers, or, you know, all towers of those things collapsed, right? And I told them this is not what they'll be doing, right? Faking towers collapsing. They would be injecting people with things, substances that would cause illnesses, you know. So this was in 2001, right? Just so that they knew that there were people around the world onto them. But what my technology showed was that if you have the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, and I published a paper on sudden adult death as the last author, as the PhD supervisor, right? My PhD student was #1 in 2006, to show that the body mounts an immune response to a very small area on a protein, and that can give you the symptoms of inducing an enlarged heart, and people drop dead, right, within a few weeks. And it's the same thing. You can get the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, and it turns out the body mounts an immune response to just a little chain of about 12 amino acids, and they knew that. So I had figured out in the 80s that that's what they were at, but they had actually planned this, you know, 40 years before. So I invented the technology in order to provide the evidence and to be able to prepare to show what they were at now, you know, 40 years in the future. So what it is if you have the symptoms of multiple sclerosis or shortness of breath or arthritis, your immune system is only reacting to these 12 amino acids. So what they have done is said, well, we can find out if you have multiple sclerosis. If we want to elicit the symptoms of multiple sclerosis or sudden adult death by heart attack, they just have to put in the mRNA coding for those, which is a short fragment of about 36 nucleotides. Yeah. And so no virus, you know, so that you can imagine a virus as a lemon or a melon, and then the bit, you know, if it existed, would just be a fragment of it, which they can make up as a sequence. But they just have to figure out what symptom do we want to elicit. We just put in that fragment of mRNA, and then you can elicit that response. And in a way, that's what I was saying in May 2020 in my video. So I was talking at one level to ordinary people, but at another level, I put in a few slides there to let them know that not only could we knew what they were at, but that we can future-proof it and detect it for fraud in the future, and that the signal will be in people's bodies all their lives to backwards show that it was with intent that what they injected. So the short answer then is that you can induce any symptom just by eliciting a fragment, and you can pretend by a sequence that it's part of a virus or a bacterium, but it doesn't need to exist. But you can pretend it does by putting those 36 nucleotides, pretend they're the mRNA of something that can exist or doesn't have to exist, and make that up to be a virus. And then that fragment can be in your saliva, right? Because the mRNA doesn't break down. And then that fragment can be in your spit, but shedding is the absolute wrong word. It's a total con. But what they can do is put in, and they probably have done, into those vials the fragments that they can call the next 20 pandemics over the next 20, 30 years, that they've already designed the PCR tests that will be positive for that fragment. And then they can make that up to be some future disease in the future. And they can put the corona football thing, you know, the shape, and then say, well, this is the spike protein and this is the sequence, but they can just make it up. So it can exist or it needn't exist. So it's a bit of a head wreck, right? So you can shed a fragment, but you're not really shedding, you're just being injected with something. But just to finish off, I cannot say that for definite without people trying to support us to do the scientific study, to actually take samples of saliva from people and to do it in a coordinated way. Yeah.
So Delores, sorry, can I call you Delores?
Yes, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Or troublemaker is always there.
I often wondered why they were so desperate to inject children. And I kind of figured, you know, let's make as much dosh as we can from the injection, even though it's unnecessary. But if what you're saying holds, that's exactly why they injected children for the next 30, 40, 50 years.
Well, so the thing is, you see, you can't really say things unless you have the evidence, right? So it's, you know what I mean? So in a way, I can't say what I'm saying unless people support me, right?
I understand it's speculation.
Yeah. So
but
in a way,
sense.
I shouldn't be saying it, but I have published about 100 papers in the, on thousands of people to map out what actually happens to people. So to prepare for this time in about 40 different diseases. Now, in one way, in the 1980s, 90s, I was thinking, well, if I do this, that may give them information, but I knew that they already had all this information, right? You know, the way they are actually many, many years ahead, they're decades ahead. So what I was doing was trying to provide the information so that in the times now, I would have the credibility in a way that, because I said to people in 2020, one of the symptoms they're going to elicit is sudden adult death, right, in 2020, which seemed unbelievable. And I said that the deaths will happen in the months and years after, because it takes time for the immune system to attack a healthy individual to weaken the heart in order that they would then die suddenly, and partly I published that paper in 2006. We started the research in around 2002 in order that people, it sounded unbelievable in 2020, but if you can, demonstrate a paper that's 15 years old, and then people realize, the year or two later, that's what happened. So the thing about the young people and why I was organizing Trafalgar Square and to give people the knowledge about vitamin D and C very early was so that mums and dads of young boys and girls would not inject them. But one of the very sad things is that it may be, and I don't know, but my feeling is that if a small proportion of that generation is injected, it may be that their plan is that just through saliva, and just generally speaking, or relationships that generation would have over 20, 30 years, that if their main issue is that people would have less children, right? And it doesn't really matter in their horrible scenario that if you're 10 years old now, and if you live to be 90, but you have no children or no sons and daughters or grandchildren, in their bigger plan, that has the same effect as you not, you know what I mean? Because you generationally will not have any children or grandchildren. And the analogy I use, if people think, if you're old enough to remember, if you were driving a car in the 70s and 80s, how many insects were there, right? That when people go into the countryside now, you can drive on the motorway for hours and there's no insects on the windscreen. And that's, so if you just try and reflect on what I'm trying to say, do you get it? That you can, in an insidious way, actually reduce the population, of insects or particular things in a multi-generational way. And I can't say for definite, and that's why I am trying to engineer a system with the co-ops, right? That people, of course, can be entrepreneurial and build local communities, but that I am going to set up Custodian Health Hub and Custodian Co-op in order that if nobody else is going to do it, that I will do it and try and fund it, myself, through either just offering people knowledge of the law or whatever I have to do in order to get the money, because people are not funding the kind of research we need to recover, particularly the children under 20 so that in 10 years time they may be able to have children. You know, we don't know. And what I'm worried about is that the boys and girls that are not injected, and I can see people, we don't know, because they know, you know, what I've heard is they may be spraying like the flu mist or whatever into the rooms that those boys and girls go in, right? Yeah, and that it may be that just in a generational way, if they have relationships with different people, that through the saliva, they may actually have the effect. And the way the immune system works so magnificently, you only need to come across a tiny fragment of something to elicit an immune response that could mean that you would have inflammation of an organ, that you may not be as fertile or fertile at all.
How do you explain, Delores, the sort of heterogeneity? And you know, I don't know if you know the website, How Bad Is My Batch? So you've got, is it as nefarious as it seems, in that there are certain batches that have got massively high,
So I don't know
mortality
if
and
you were on the
morbidity?
call, that from the day that that news came out, I was saying this is not anyone who really goes down that road. That is where they have set up a mechanism to give them a way out. So right, so that is all a setup and was promoted by people who are not on our side, right? So the plan there, which I do not agree to, so I'm only saying this reluctantly, right, is that they are trying to set up a scenario that a physician can say, well, it just was a bad batch. Like if you have, you know, you make 1,000 cars and one of them, the brakes aren't working. Yeah, that you can then say, well, it wasn't me, it was the one bad car. So it turns out that a significant proportion of all of them have probably toxic agents in them. And the cop out that it was just a bad batch, as if it was a manufacturing issue, the same as you have in other products, is a misrepresentation entirely. Do you get it?
What I can't explain though is in the sort of clinical setting, I'm seeing vaccine injured people come to me with all manner of symptoms. So for some, it's predominantly cognitive, for example, memory or intellect or confusion, etc. Other people, it's infertility. Other people, it's turbo cancer. And I can't, for the life of me, if they're all, you know, uniform doses of uniform drugs. You know, we know they were produced in a rush, but at the same time,
So nobody thinks that they are uniform, right? But the issue with the immune system is that everybody's immune system. So you know the way the immune system, if you have an adverse event after an injection, may be what you would naturally suffer in your 80s and 90s, right? So we know that different people have, some of them have scleroderma. You know, when they get older, as their immune system breaks down or they're stressed, some of them have multiple sclerosis. So what I gave evidence of after 2001, and what I was saying in all my interviews, is that the symptoms will be the symptom there are 88 different autoimmune diseases, maybe the autoimmune disease that you would be predisposed to if you were, 50 years older, right? And that's why I was saying in 2020 is that the symptoms will appear entirely differently, because the immune system will be boosted to react to whatever you would, once your system is skewed, will attack your own body in a different way, and people will present with different autoimmune diseases, But the other thing is that we know that what was in the batches was not consistent at all, right? So there is no presumption that there was consistency. And, so really what it is that, and that's why I showed you the Attorney General, right? The letter. This is kind of a fundamental undermining of lawful accountability, right? So normally how it works is if one man or woman died on a clinical trial, the physicians and the physician's oversight body would actually step in and say, we will stop the clinical trial. So what they're doing, what I call Agenda 21 is chaos by design, right? So what they're doing in an insidious way is undermining the safeguards in society for murdering people. So the coroner and the attorney general in law have an absolute obligation, if people are dying following any intervention of a man or woman, whether they're in a white coat or not. Yeah, if the system was working, And as we saw in Ireland, in one care home, 51 people were injected. And there was 19 coffins within 2 weeks, 8 coffins within 2 days, right? And no investigation, right? Yeah, so the coroner's not doing their job, the local physician, doctor isn't doing their job, the undertaker, the police, the attorney general. Do you get it? The regulators? Yeah. Right? So what we then need to do, like that, on the one hand, you don't want to shock people, but on the other hand, you know, even if people who kind of seem to be a little bit numb, you know, that we analyzed the deaths of 10 care homes. So that was the injections happened in January 2021, and there was a group of about 20 of us, again, all voluntary with Health Freedom Ireland, analysed those death certs and sent the death certs and the analysis to every member of Parliament in Ireland by April 2021. And in that one care home, there was 3 deaths in the year before, 6 deaths in the 3 years before, and they were all injected 21st of January. 8 of them were dead by the 22nd of January, right? 8 out of 51. 19 out of 51 were dead within 14 days, within 2 weeks, right? 19 coffins, and then 26 within 5 weeks, right? And so there was only 3 deaths in the year before. So the thing is, what people need to do now is think, well, sometime you're going to be in a care home. And you're now living in a country where you have 51 of your friends. 2 days later, right, or 2 weeks later, there's 20 funerals or 19 funerals, and nobody does anything, right? That's where we are, right? Now, I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean? So in a way, the batches thing, right? If you're going to, that was just one care home. We had 10 care homes. The care homes in Ireland are small, where there was more than 10 people that died within days, right?
And the tragedy is, I mean, I've got some experience of care homes. I was operational paramedic for 15 years and GP surgery home visiting paramedic. And I know, and I think most people can probably guess here, that a tiny fraction of those people in care homes were able to give informed consent. What happened is a district nurse went in and just shot up needles in every arm. No one gave consent for it.
Yes, I know, but it's actually the people on this call that are actually responsible in a way, right? So the kind of hard truth is that if you do nothing, that's where you're going to end up, right? It's a bit like if you don't actually help us to analyze the adverse events, so your children and grandchildren are not infertile, you know what I mean? So the scale of, so the thing is, it's completely solvable, right? And all you have to do is, and you don't have to know the law. So everybody, there are lots of reasons in psychology for people why they don't do anything, right? And so that's why I haven't really been focusing on, obviously behind the scenes, we're doing everything we can, and I'm always available, right, to do the analysis all the time, right? The way we did the analysis in the care homes, we could do that to analyze the adverse events and try and detox people. If people like you actually get together and say, let's do 10 of my loved ones, or my daughter is 19 and she's, she now has epilepsy she didn't have, I'd like to sort her out, and 10 of her friends. You know what I mean? This is completely doable. Right? But the thing is, we do need people to, so what I'm saying, I'm not saying what I'm saying in order to create more fear. I'm saying what I'm saying is that this is the beginning of the beginning. Okay? This is not going to get any better. Yeah? And right? But how you can stop it all is, we only need a few people to actually say, I'm going to spend 3 hours a week actually doing something, instead of just, sitting back and being worried. And so partly why we're doing the co-ops is a way for people, even if you're only a small number in your nation or in the world, it's a solution that I've, proposed. But also what I want to do is like the David, right? Is that the people that have actually put themselves on the line and lost income, it's people like David and the 600 nurses in Sweden, that we need to make them the most successful nurses and physicians. Because if I was in a care home, what I, in a real common sense way, I would prefer it to be run by a nurse that lost her job, or by David,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But the thing is, it's up to you to do that, right? It's up to people like you to go, well, instead of worrying, oh my God, I know that like half the care home died 2 years ago, and there's going to be another vaccine, and 5 years' time, I'm going to be in my care home and I'm doing nothing about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? That everybody's paralyzed with worry. It's now time for you to think, well, if there is a way that I could actually support people, like join a co-op or support a lawful health hub, and it's £3 a week, and then I'll go around and tell the elderly people, well, maybe we'll help support David do a health hub, and we'll support the nurse or the midwife, so that you do not have to go into their corporation birth certificate system. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in that in that sort of vein, Delores, would you mind just texting Dave or emailing Dave some of your material? And what I can do, we have
No, so the thing is, it's all out there. It's on my website. So rather than me, don't give me a job. You can go to @Delores Cahill on Telegram. Do you know what I mean, guys?
All I'm asking is for like a note of that, because I can put out an email.
I'll tell you now, right? Tell you now, @Delores Cahill on Telegram. @Delores Cahill on Telegram. And I did an 80-minute interview, and it was up on the 30th of September, and it's one of the best.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll
So
put that
one
out
of
there.
the things is, the way, obviously I'm usually nice and all, but for people on this call is, we are at the beginning of the beginning, and there's not that many people who are aware. So what you kind of now have to do is actively say, if someone I know is making toothpaste or making honey, or there's a midwife or a nurse or a hairdresser, that you have to actually take the time to consciously spend your money. If you're going to go on holidays anyway, try and take the time to support a business or a restaurant that didn't, or a nurse or a physician, or a farmer,
Yeah, absolutely.
You get it?
Yeah.
Because what's kind of unusual is that even though we had these conversations in 2020, there's not that many businesses or care homes or mobile phone manufacturers or media, or real TV that are freedom loving, or home education systems. And then it's really up to you, because we are probably half of the population, 30 million people. Now, I come from an entrepreneurial background. I do landscape mapping. I used to advise governments on how the best way to do it. But what I'm saying in this conversation is, we need your help, right? Do you know what I mean? So there's only, like, I'm doing trial by jury, because if we don't hold the coroners to account for falsifying the death certs, and if David's colleagues who are qualified as medical doctors and nurses are still injecting people and essentially murdering them, and David and his colleagues are not stopping them murdering people in the hospitals, right? So that's what's going on, is that the people who've qualified as physicians and nurses are standing by every day watching people drop dead after injections, and they are giving injections now to teenagers, and everybody knows it's going on, and there are 3,000 excess deaths a week, 12,000, do you know what I mean? And no one is actually really supporting and saying, to the nurses, right, stop. Literally you have to go and have a conversation, because I've been on the phone to whistleblower nurses where they have fulfilled orders to not give food and drink to people in Britain and Ireland, and locked people in hospital while they're scratching the doors, and then go to them 2 days later and there's a dead body, right? Now, I know that's a bit uncomfortable, but also consultants are ringing me saying they're injecting people when they're in operations that are unvaccinated.
Really?
And they're seeing it going on, right? Now, of course it is, right? Now, the thing is, it's actually in a way your job to put pressure on in your community and in the care home, right? How many of you have gone into the care homes and actually talked to the people where, A quarter of their friends died within 2 weeks, 2 years ago, and nobody goes in and says to them, it must be quite frightening now to go to bed, to wonder, is there somebody else going to come in? And then, you know, you or the person beside you is going to be dead in 2 weeks' time. Do you know what I mean? I know it's not a very easy conversation, but the why it's important to have it now is that they, in Agenda 21, they have to lock down the nation everywhere for climate change or moneypox or monkeypox or whatever, right? So it may be that it's trickier for us to have these conversations in the months ahead, right? Do you know what I mean? And yeah, and I'm sure the people here are good, but we do have to move into people actually, you know, making kind of decisions, or at least trying to spread the conversation and change the conversation. So when we're doing trial by jury, it's actually now, if you want to do something, we will have an event somewhere between Oxford and London on the 2nd of December, 2023. The 2nd of December, it's a Saturday. Now they are really, like, they issued allegedly a new warrant that I've never seen a week ago, and they're interfering with my phone and I'm locked out of the banking system, you know? So, you know, what they, and I'm only mentioning that is that if you were a civil servant or a nurse or a coroner, and you've gone along with falsifying death certs, or you're the Attorney General, or you're dressed up as police, they must be quite worried now, right? Imagine how worried you'd be if you were in a care home owner or a nurse or a midwife, you know, and you've been injecting pregnant women, and then those women have lost their babies. And then suddenly you hear, well, there is a trial by jury lawful mechanism that you can hold people to account. Do you know what I mean? So this is a tricky time, yeah, and you know, but it's kind of a time that we kind of need to have the conversation. What are we going to do in England? Are we going to protect the care homes? Are we going to protect the pregnant women? And then, you know, to just have the conversation to let's stop injecting pregnant women, or let's not inject the elderly in the care homes, or just to stop, have the help me to do a trial by jury. There should be no health treatments in the schools, full stop. Do you know what I mean? For you guys to think of something. Like if I wasn't, I'm not doing it in an ego way, but if I wasn't, I'm obviously doing the things that nobody else can do. But like there's loads of things you guys as grandmothers campaign to protect pregnant women, you know, or a grandfather's campaign to stop all injections in the school, or, you know what I mean? So it's kind of time for people really to stop them, because they're all in and they're worried, right? The police are worried, you know, but not in a good way. Yeah. Okay. I know it's a little bit depressing, but I'm afraid we have to sometimes have these chats, David.
And that's kind of what all this is about, isn't it? And I think Amelia had a question, but I've just seen her. You've got to shoot off now, Amelia. Is that right?
Yes, I do now, unfortunately. It's been really interesting. Thank you. But no, my question was answered. It was just it was just along the lines of what can we do as ordinary people without being met with resistance. And because I've tried on several occasions, and you know, people just think you're a loony. So, but you've answered the question in how we can help by supporting other people who are actually actively making change. So that was my question, but you did answer that.
No,
brilliant. I mean,
you.
that's what this kind of group is, the thinking behind it, and we're only getting bigger. So yeah, it's what.
And I think the thing around the co-ops, right, is this is the centuries-old co-op model. I'm working with 9 people, right, in Britain and Ireland, but it's around that. Say if you're an individual on your own, that if you can get in with the family or in a co-op in your area, and then it's the same paperwork for a local co-op or a health hub co-op, that even if you just become a member of the co-op and you give like £3 a month, and it's David's health hub co-op or whatever, that partly why I have come up with this co-op model, it's just based on the centuries-old co-op model, is a mechanism to try and help people engage in their community, right? And in custodian, which will be my one, it may be that people, if they want the protection of me, now of course, if loads of people join, it'll have to be practical around a precedence case, But the idea may be if 1,000 nurses or physicians were in the custodian health hub, because they're all individuals, or people elderly in the care homes, right? That then if, or whoever, right, ordinary people, that then if the police come or if they say no and they're coerced or whatever, that then they can either get me or we can be involved in educating people in different co-ops to then not feel so alone, you know, and then that David's health hub would be in the co-op and the care home would be in the co-op. Because really what you want to do, or that you would decide to start a care hub, you know what I mean? So say if you're in your 50s, you could get together with your community and say, well, you know what, I may need a care home in 20 years time, but can we kind of get together as Devon or Cornwall, you know, 50-year-olds and say, well, if we get a care home in the future, we don't want to be locked down, you know, we don't want to do X, Y, and Z, and try and arrange that in the future, if someone wants to set up a care home, that you go, well, can this care home respect my right to go out and travel, and I will never be locked in, and you will actually push back on things, you know? So that's what the co-op model is trying to do, but I'm trying to push it back to you that it's actually easier to, you know, there was a meme that said 7 billion people, you know, all thought they were alone, right? Do you know what I mean? So we have to get out of the psychology of it's like, oh, it's only me. I can't, you know, one man or woman can't do anything. The reason why mostly one man or woman is that they don't actually spend 3 hours a week thinking, what can I do? Do you know what I mean? They don't spend 5 minutes thinking, well, will I send a card, you know, to anyone? Will I do something? And do you know what I mean? I'm not being critical. And obviously people went to stand in the park, but this is now, we're 4 years in, and it's now time for everybody who's aware to try and build the structure. If you're going to need a care home, or if you're going to need a home education, you know, for your grandchildren, or if you want a hairdresser that won't lock down, or a restaurant or a hotel, then you have to actively think, I'm going to promote those businesses and work in my community. And the co-op model is the one I'm promoting. And of course, when we put the paperwork out, after we've gone through the pilot phase, the co-ops will be independent, and you only need 3 people to set up a co-op, and it doesn't really cost any money, and you can set it up in the law or the legal system. It's just a way of working together.
Thank you.
I think just before we sign off, Dave and I have just said a couple of texts between each other, and I'm going to read it out if it's all right with you, Dave. She's great, love her, shoots from the hip. And I wrote back, deaf, so passionate. So there we go.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I guess the thing is, you know what, which is kind of sad, is I've read what this is going to be in the future, right? So they have a plan for every year in health and in education, you know, for the whole thing, for the rest of the century. And it is so shocking, and they're completely on track. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it is, you know, and I don't exaggerate. Yeah.
And I think you're right. I'm going to just wind up the meeting now because I'm aware people are going to go. But
no worries.
Just one thing, Delores, that I want to say, sort of in response to everything you've been saying, is that I have complete and utter faith that we will win.
Well, we will, but not if everyone, like, you know, the way we kind of will. But why I'm having this conversation is
to ensure we will.
If we were to kind of say, how effective have we been in 22, 23, we'll say, you know, in the last 18 months? You know, if we were to actually look at, you know, what have people, do we have radio stations? Do we have mobile phones? Do we have care home networks? Is David protected? You know what I mean? That in the last 18 months or 2 years, and that's why I'm having this conversation now in a way, you know?
One of my big frustrations, Delores, I'm in groups of doctors, and it's only what I can describe as an echo chamber. There's 200 doctors in one group, there's 300 in the other, all UK-based, awake, in inverted commas, doctors. You can count on one hand how many have spoken out publicly or approached the care homes or called out the death certification nonsense. You know, I saw that from day one. People with cancer going into hospital, getting COVID-19 on the death certificate. You know, bodies were just cremated. without any questions being asked. It's
Yeah,
absolutely
and you know what,
brilliant.
David, I admire you, right? I really admire you, and I know this group are obviously very action focused, right? But I guess the thing is, people will be shocked. So in a way, it's all spelled out what's going to happen, right? Now, I don't want to scare people, but when I am saying we need to work together, and if we have to work and support people like Dave, there is a big reason, right? Because there are so few people speaking out that if things, they may have to lock down, right, again. And if people like Dave are not protected, right, by his community, then there will be very few medical professionals to help everybody else, to help the freedom fighters, and no structure. No, you know what I mean?
Structure's the key. It's about bringing everything together somehow, some kind of framework. There's lots of us who are involved in groups and organizations and kind of pseudo political groups or people call themselves truthers or whatever, Telegram groups or direct action groups. But if there's an overarching framework, then that's going to make the what's the expression? The sum of the parts being greater than the individual
and I know we have to go exactly. So the model we're proposing, and I've been working on it with people in Britain and Ireland, is around the multi-state. So Chris Coverdale has done a huge amount of research, and his model is multi-stakeholder cooperatives, which is very simple. And you can do it for your local farmers or your local school or your local care home or just yourself. Or you can work in your local community, and we're going to roll that out in around 8 for local people, local areas in the next few months, and then 8 example health hubs where existing health professionals or health centers, and this paperwork is a multi-stakeholder cooperative, and you can go into it as a legal entity, a legal company, but a man or woman, a trust, a foundation, any kind of structure in the law and in the legal system. And then some of the health hubs are converting to it that are already health centers for 10, 20 years. And then I'll be setting up custodian health hub just for people who find themselves on their own, and custodian co-op where people can become members in the next month or two. But the main thing is we want to spread the knowledge of the lawful trial by jury system through the cooperative networks and the health centers, and then that the community would support the health professionals in the health centers. In the case that someone like David, that 50 boys in blue come in to make, or the General Medical Council try and challenge him, that he already is working in a health hub in the law, supported by a community, that then David can say, I want to instigate a lawful trial by jury to challenge the General Medical Council for trying to interfere with me giving health information. So that's the model. So if you do want to put in the 2nd of December, we're looking for a big venue, and it will be just an educational event, and it could be David's case as a precedence, or the 15-minute cities in Oxford, or any kind of example as an educational trial by jury to push back. So, but I'm trying to motivate other people to get out of their comfort zone and try and build the structures as well, But thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Any last words,
I'm sorry,
Dave?
it was a bit depressing. I'm sorry, but I know David needs this as well, right? You need people to support you.
Absolutely, there's a lot of words and not enough action. That's why I pulled out of a lot of the groups lately, because there's a lot of words, conversations, sharing of data, information, articles, and that's fine. That's fine. Increasing awareness and the rest of it. But we need some action now, and we know what's coming, and the wheels are in motion, as you mentioned. So we've got to just look into our grandkids' eyes and our kids' eyes and say, look, what have I done? What did I do in this life that stops the next agenda that's moving in? And that's what motivates me anyway. So thank you ever so much, Delores, for
No worries.
A, your time, B, your expertise, C, your absolute warrior, on fire, generations ahead of your time. And I'm sure on behalf of everyone, you're a hero.
Oh no,
You're a hero to me.
I wish I could do more, right? So that's why I'm trying to motivate people. But thank you, and thank you for all your support. And of course, in the World Freedom Alliance and the World Doctors Alliance and all the organizations, there are thousands of people. So, and I'd be delighted if people support us in the co-ops and on the 2nd of December as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks,
All right.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Dolores, again. All the
God
best.
bless
Bye.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.